Hi, welcome back to Kingdom Portions here in Kingdom in Context. This week, it's fascinating. We're going through Exodus 18 through the end of 20. We're going to be looking at irrefutable proof that God's instructions, His law, was already around and being followed to some degree way before the Ten Commandments were spoken from Sinai. We hope this video, this particular episode, becomes an incredible resource for you as you speak to your friends, families, and even strangers about the relevance of God's instructions for us, because it leads to our joy and discipleship with Yeshua of Nazareth. Thanks for joining us. Stick till the end. Hi, Shabbat Shalom. Welcome to Kingdom Portions here on Kingdom in Context. I'm Sean Griffin, accompanied by my beautiful and lovely wife.
Hey guys, I'm Lindsay Griffin. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, sweetie.
Shabbat Shalom.
It's always fun to do these with you.
I agree.
Yeah, I have a great time. And for the viewer out there, if you've been following us for a while and watching these with us and participating with us, thank you. We really appreciate you for participating in with these as we go through the scriptures and talk about them. And anything that you might want to say, you're welcome to put them in the comments below as we go, just not only for your thoughts, but any questions you may have. At this point, it's been kind of a building concept, right? Because we have a lot of videos we've put out already over the past year, and people are still finding old videos and commenting on old videos. So my notifications on my YouTube channel fills up with people commenting all day long. Please don't be offended if I can't get to your comment immediately. I try to do my best to go back and check them all and be able to respond. Sometimes I just don't have the time to get to all of them because we're still just doing this part-time. You know, we both have full-time jobs, so just please be patient with us in that regard. But ultimately, please, we welcome your interaction because we want to hear feedback and we want to know that you guys are picking up what we're putting down, right? So this whole concept of us trying to elaborate on the scriptures and bring clarity to the gospel of the kingdom of God, because it is everywhere in the scriptures. And that is our mission here at Kingdom in Context, is to draw attention to the gospel of the kingdom of God that Yeshua preached and all the prophets preached. And so this is why we even saw a small reference of it last week in our portion when Moses in chapter 15 of Exodus was singing his prayer after the Red Sea event. And he, in that prayer, is built in some mentions and references of the gospel of the kingdom of God. It's amazing. So, and of course, Yeshua is the king of the kingdom that we expect, right? He is the good news of the kingdom to come. Nothing ever takes away from Yeshua's glory, might, power, or how we magnify him and revere him in discipleship at all. It's just simply he had a message that he taught that was consistent with all the prophets taught. And we noticed as we started this channel a year ago, there's a lot of mainstream churches that do not talk about Jesus' actual message. So that's why our heart was, let's do these kingdom portions. Let's do these weekly Bible studies, basically, where since that message is layered into all of the Old Testament and the New Testament and the Apocryphal books, let's show people that, right? Let's draw their attention to just how much Yeshua's message was everywhere in all of Scripture. So that's our passion. As always, we just like to share with folks that if anything that we're doing here in this ministry does bless you, there's ways that you can support us, and people have asked us for this in the past, so we provided them. And it's in the description box below. There's both a PayPal, a Patreon, or even a P.O. box. And as always, we just want to remind people we're not Levites, right? So we're not accepting a tithe. We don't call it a tithe. It's just a free will donation to support us because you've been blessed by what we do. It's built off the principle of Matthew 10, where Yeshua sent out his disciples to preach the gospel of the kingdom of God, which is what we do here at this channel. And he basically told them, don't take any money with them, because if your message blesses those whom you're talking to, they will in turn bless you. And so that's the only principle we're standing on. We thank you for prayerfully considering it. Otherwise, sweetie, do you have any announcements or anything that you want to talk about before we start?
No, I think we can get right into it.
All right. Well, we're going to start reading in Exodus 18, for those of you following along. Here in verse 1, it says, Now Jethro, the priest of Midian, Moses' father-in-law, heard of all that God had done for Moses and for Israel his people, how the Lord had brought Israel out of Egypt. Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took Moses' wife Zipporah, after he had sent her away, and her 2 sons, of whom one was named Gershom, for Moses said, I have been a sojourner in a foreign land. The other was named Eleazar, for he said, The God of my father was my help and delivered me from the sword of Pharaoh. Then Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, came with his sons and his wife to Moses in the wilderness where he camped, at the mount of God. He sent word to Moses, I, your father-in-law, Jethro, am coming to you with your wife and her 2 sons with her. Then Moses went out to meet his father-in-law, and he bowed down and kissed him. And they asked each other of their welfare and went into the tent. Moses told his father-in-law all that the Lord had done to Pharaoh and to the Egyptians for Israel's sake, all the hardship that had befallen them on their journey, and how the Lord had delivered them. Jethro rejoiced over all the goodness which the Lord had done to Israel in delivering them from the hand of the Egyptians. So Jethro said, Blessed be the Lord who delivered you from the hand of the Egyptians and from the hand of Pharaoh, and who delivered the people from under the hand of the Egyptians. Now I know that the Lord is greater than all the gods. Indeed, it was proven when they dealt proudly against the people. Then Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took a burnt offering and sacrifices for God. And Aaron came with all the elders of Israel to eat a meal with Moses, his father-in-law, before God. It came about the next day that Moses set to judge the people, and the people stood about Moses from the morning until the evening. Now, when Moses' father-in-law saw all that he was doing for the people, he said, What is this thing that you are doing? For the people, why do you alone sit as judge, and all the people stand about you from morning until evening? Moses said to his father-in-law, Because the people come to me to inquire of God. When they have a dispute, it comes to me, and I judge between man and his neighbor and make known the statutes of God and his laws. Moses' father-in-law said to him, The thing that you are doing is not good. You will surely wear out both yourselves and these people who are with you, for the task is too heavy for you. You cannot do it alone. Now listen to me. I will give you counsel, and God be with you. You be the people's representative before God, and you bring the disputes to God. Then teach them the statutes and the laws, and make known to them in the way in which they are to walk and the work they are to do. Furthermore, you shall select out of all the people able men who fear God, men of truth, those who hate dishonest gain. You shall place these over them as leaders of thousands and of hundreds, of 50s and 10s. Let them judge the people at all times. And let it be that every major dispute they will bring to you, but every minor dispute they themselves will judge. So it will be easier for you, and they will bear the burden with you. If you do this thing, and God so commands you, then you will be able to endure, and all these people will also go to their place in peace. So Moses listened to his father-in-law and did all that he said. Moses chose able men out of all of Israel and made them heads over the peoples, leaders of thousands, of hundreds, of 50s and 10s. They judged the people at all times. The difficult dispute they would bring to Moses, but every minor dispute they themselves would judge. Then Moses bade his father-in-law farewell, and he went his way into his own land. All right, guys. I mean, if it's not already sticking out to you like a sore thumb at this point, we're going to talk about it. What sticks out, babe?
Well, obviously, Moses has statutes and laws to teach the people with and to judge them by.
Yes. Where did he get those?
Right, because chapter 19 hasn't happened yet.
Yes, this is in chapter 18. Where did he get those?
I would think his forefathers.
Oh, guys, as we've talked about in so many portions previously, especially as we've paired many different times on this particular series of Kingdom portions, we've paired the Book of Jubilees and other apocryphal books that basically talk in great detail. We've gone over Genesis in great detail, how they were abiding by the laws of God. And this is where we're going to get into chapter 19 and 20 and all the way up to 32, in the following weeks, where we get the fullness of the law given to man. Whereas Jubilees says, up until the point of Sinai, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and all the way back to Adam, all those guys and all the people from before Moses that were followers of the Almighty, they had laws, statutes, ordinances, and decrees, but they didn't have everything pertaining to the Levitical priesthood, pertaining to the tabernacle, and specifics, all the little specifics. So that's why they get the fullness of it, even a little bit more of legislative laws because of all the community they're in, all the different aspects of the different cities they're going to. Right. So there was a little bit more detail given in this era we're about to go into here with Moses receiving the law as mediated through angels on Mount Sinai. But before that, they absolutely had the laws of God. Jubilees chapter 7 tells us that Noah was teaching his sons to love your neighbor as yourself. So that's just one of the things. He was teaching them much more of the law of God, right? In Genesis 26:5, a famous passage, Abraham is commended by the Father, and the Almighty is telling Isaac, hey, you should behave like your father Abraham because he was faithful. He kept my commandments, my statutes, my ordinances, and my decrees. And so they had the law of God, right? They just didn't have all the extra details that we are going to be receiving as the Levites concerning the tabernacle and all these other things, because their context is changing now, right?
Right. We also have laws about them, dealing with all the various ites that they need to get out of the land as they're going in there. So I mean, there's even stuff that, contextually doesn't apply to anyone but them at that time.
That's right.
Conquering that land. So there's even some of that in there.
Yeah. So that's why, it's funny when people try to bring a case against the scriptural definition of obeying God, which is to keep his commandments. And they try to say, well, we don't have to do that anymore because of Jesus. And not only is that not in scripture, because not only did Jesus tell us that we need to keep the commandments, it's part of our discipleship, but all the epistle writers, the apostles after him, they did as well in every single book. And so it's a very strange argument. But many people claim this concept of dispensation teaching, where they believe that at this moment we're reading about here, the children of Israel have come out of the bondage of Egypt. They're in the wilderness of Sinai at the base of Mount Sinai, and people claim, erroneously claim, that this is the moment where the law was first given to mankind. That is not true in any way whatsoever.
And what's worse is they don't even say the 12 tribes of Israel. They say the Jews.
That's right, yeah. There's a lot of misunderstanding going on there. And it really, the first person that even came up with that theory, I want to ask him, has he even read Genesis?
Right.
Lo and behold, one of the guys that promoted that theory so heavily about 120, 130 years ago did not even believe Genesis was actually literal. He thought the first 3 chapters of Genesis were just basically allegory and you can make of them what you will. How fitting that suddenly he comes along and he doesn't understand the law of God is eternal, because it is instructions for living. So if you're breathing and you're living, there's instructions for how you behave, right? And this is the Father said, well, here's my behavior, emulate it, right? Practice my behavior. You're going to fail, so therefore I'm going to give you priesthood as well, but I want you to practice my behavior, because if you do this, it'll just lead to good results, righteousness, So they absolutely had the law of God, so much so that before Mount Sinai moment, before the big 10 Commandments moment happens, and the thundercloud that we're going to read with the lightning and the fire and the thunder in the next chapter, before that even dropped, Moses is sitting down day after day.
Yeah.
Day after day, okay? And this is in the months leading that they left, and Passover was the first month. And as we're about to read in the beginning of Exodus 19, this Mount Sinai moment with the 10 Commandments being given happened in the 3rd month. So that means for 60 days, approximately, every day Moses is sitting down and all these people are coming to him with their problems. He's playing Judge Judy, basically.
Yeah.
Or Justice Joe Brown. I don't know, whatever you want to say. I mean, whoever you follow, I don't know. But he's basically...
It's the first people's court,
It is. It's the first people's court. And he's having to, quickly go through all these things. And Jethro's like, no, you need to delegate your authority. Find men that are honest, that don't, won't take a bribe. That they can also explain and delineate the laws of God through justice and righteous judgment, because they had them. That's the point. They had them to do that with, right? And this is how Moses could be considered humble and righteous, because he was already following them, right? So
would you consider this a little like picture of the kingdom of, Yeshua being that main judge, and then all of us as the royal priesthood underneath him? And I mean, we're going to be judging among the nations, right?
Sure, yeah.
So it might be something.
Yeshua is definitely, like he's likened a prophet unto Moses, right? For sure. And that's also a unique concept that Jethro knows what a sacrifice is, what a burnt offering is. Yeah. Because he's like, oh man, I heard what everything Yahweh did for you coming out of Egypt, and now I realize that Yahweh is truly the greatest God there is, right?
Yeah, I mean...
So he has actually a conversion moment, which is interesting.
Yeah.
And he immediately, signifies that conversion moment with a burnt offering.
Yeah, that's what really, is so impressive about it, is it seems like... I mean, I know these first 2 books, Genesis and Exodus, they summarize long periods of time, but it seems like a pretty quick transition from him saying, oh my gosh, he's coming to faith, he's realizing Yahweh is the one true God, and then immediately going into obedience. Yeah. So there's he doesn't skip a beat in there, which is really promising, because we know he was some sort of a pagan priest before that. Yeah. So, I mean, Father can change anyone's heart.
And as verse 12 through 16 talked about, even Aaron came to join him in this burnt sacrifice. Because remember, the concept of these burnt offerings, and doing a sacrifice, is that it's like a covenant meal. Right. Now I know there were some specific ones that they may have burnt completely, but the whole concept here is that he's offering a sacrifice to God, which is like a meal unto God. And Aaron came and joined him in that, which means that there's validation, and means that, I mean, you can't, if Aaron would be breaking the general concept of how to worship God, to go with someone who is pagan, basically,
Right.
and do an altar sacrifice to Yahweh. So now, granted, I know a lot of people right now are probably behind the camera in their homes going, well, don't let Aaron be your judge. He's the one that made the golden calf. Right? So yeah,
He's human like everybody else.
Yeah, they're probably questioning his discernment. But no, guys, this is the point where we're drawing for the whole chapter.
Yeah.
Is that they already had the statutes, the laws, decrees, the judgments. They already had an idea of what sacrifice was. That's why we saw Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob doing sacrifices back in Genesis and the previous portions we've covered. This is how Moses could even go to Pharaoh and say, we want to go to the wilderness to do sacrifices,
Right.
to worship God in the wilderness on a 3-day journey, because they knew what they were.
Right.
This is how Pharaoh could even tell the people, no, don't leave, just do the sacrifices in Goshen where you are.
Yeah.
Because he knew what they were, right? And
Right.
he knew the Hebrews knew how to do them. So I just think that it's a very disadvantageous paradigm for many believers to think that God's instructions for worship and for righteousness, which means good moral behavior, and for having a relationship with Him, to think that those instructions were only given at Sinai and all those people for 2,000 plus years beforehand didn't have them. I mean, that's not the way our Father works, and that's not what the Word actually says. So we're excited to point out that they already had a sense of direction with God's instructions for living. We're just about to see in the following chapters a much more detailed approach that's given to him. And some of them are emblazoned and engraved on the stones. And this whole process we're about to see is to solidify this covenant of the people becoming fearful in a proper fear of Yahweh, so they would actually obey Him and not try to go back to Egypt.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, but yeah, what else in this chapter, baby, that sticks out to you?
I think, we pretty much covered all the points that we had.
Oh, at the very beginning, it says that Jethro brought his wife and children back to him.
Right, that was one thing. There's a little gap in the story there. So apparently...
Because this is after he sent them away.
Right. Apparently Zipporah and Moses' 2 sons, he had 2 sons,
Gershom and Eliezer,
were sent away at some point. And, I don't really know. I mean, maybe he knew things were going to get wild and crazy in Egypt. I don't know. Maybe he, had so much going on, he couldn't have the family with him at that moment. Who really knows? But they were brought back.
That's
so
right.
They're reunited after.
So last time we saw
out.
Zipporah, they were on their way with Gershom and Eliezer to Egypt.
Yeah.
Okay. As we talked about in the last 2 episodes of Kingdom Portions, as we went over the plagues, they weren't just day after day after day. There was time portions in between each plague. So our best surmising guess is that they were sent back at some point during all the plagues, that the wife and 2 children were sent back to Jethro and Midian, just whether for safety or whether it's just, the trip was turned into a longer stretch than they originally thought and they didn't bring enough underwear. I don't know.
All those plagues could be hard on a marriage. I don't know.
Well, I'm sure that, I'm just saying, like, there's clearly a time period there that gives plausibility for Moses to be like, okay, wife and children, go back home. I'm going to take care of business here. Because at one point, Pharaoh threatened to take their heads. Right. Aaron and Moses. So maybe at that point, maybe that's the moment where, Eliezer was like, because we escaped the sword of Pharaoh. Right. Maybe he sent them away at that point. The point is, as the story picks up here, the whole reason Jethro is showing up here in the wilderness of Sinai is to bring the wife and children back to him. So we actually see about this later, how even some of Jethro's people were with him and they stayed with him for 2 years. We read about that later in the book of Numbers. And then they want to go back home to Midian, and Moses is trying to be like, no, don't leave, So yeah, there's clearly time passing is the whole reason we bring that up. Okay, so this, again, as we're reading these first few books in Scripture, they're not chronological day after day, event after event. Okay, we're reading about a moment here in chapter 18 that takes place within a 60-day window, but chapter 19 starts out on the first day of the 3rd month. So we know the day that they left Egypt was the first day of the 1st month. The 14th day or the 15th day of the 1st month. So we've got 45 to 60 days, and then we're going into another event in chapter 19. So it just covers large portions of time is the whole idea.
One other thing that I think is interesting is just to think about Jethro going back to Midian, and it sounds like he possibly kept the ways of Yahweh for the rest of his life, because this isn't a promotion of this sect of religious belief or anything, but I didn't know there is a religious sect of people who Jethro is like their main
That's right.
prophet that they, and they get some of the details of the story kind of wonky. And
As a very, very clear disclaimer, it's a non-scriptural sect of people in the Middle East that have the story of Jethro,
right?
And he's one of their religious heroes.
Yeah, and they believe the words of Moses and stuff like that. So to me, it's just interesting. It's just a little bit of physical evidence, if you will, that he most likely went back to Midian and kept those ways. Yeah, because there are people all this time later who remember him and relate him directly to Moses. So just kind of a neat little tidbit.
It is, yeah, absolutely. Just basic, easy validation for the reality that Scripture really happened as a historical concept.
Right.
So, all right, we're going to go on to chapter 19, guys.
Okay. In the 3rd month after the sons of Israel had gone out of the land of Egypt, on that very day they came into the wilderness of Sinai. When they set out from Rephidim, they came to the wilderness of Sinai and camped in the wilderness, and there Israel camped in front of the mountain. Moses went up to God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain, saying, Thus you shall say to the house of Jacob, and tell the sons of Israel, You yourselves have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings, and brought you to myself. Now then, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, then you shall be my own possession among all the peoples, for all the earth is mine. And you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the sons of Israel. So Moses came and called the elders of the people, and set before them all these words which the Lord had commanded him. And the people answered together and said, All that the Lord has spoken we will do. And Moses brought back the words of the people to the Lord. So the Lord said to Moses, Behold, I will come to you in a thick cloud, so that the people may hear when I speak with you, and may also believe in you forever. Then Moses told the words of the people to the Lord. The Lord also said to Moses, Go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow, and let them wash their garments, and let them be ready for the 3rd day. For on the 3rd day the Lord will come down on Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people. You shall set bounds for the people all around, saying, Beware that you do not go up on the mountain or touch the border of it. Whoever touches the mountain shall surely be put to death. No hand shall touch him, but he shall surely be stoned or shot through. Whether beast or man, he shall not live. When the ram's horn sounds a long blast, they shall come up to the mountain. So Moses went down from the mountain to the people and consecrated the people, and they washed their garments. He said to the people, Be ready for the 3rd day. Do not go near a woman. So it came about on the 3rd day, when it was morning, that there were thunder and lightning flashes and a thick cloud upon the mountain, and a very loud trumpet sound, so that all the people who were in the camp trembled. And Moses brought the people out of the camp to meet God, and they stood at the foot of the mountain. Now Mount Sinai was all in smoke, because the Lord descended upon it in fire, and its smoke ascended like the smoke of a furnace, and the whole mountain quaked violently. When the sound of the trumpet grew louder and louder, Moses spoke, and God answered him with thunder. The Lord came down on Mount Sinai to the top of the mountain, and the Lord called Moses up to the top of the mountain, and Moses went up. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, Go down, warn the people, so that they do not break through to the Lord to gaze, and many of them perish. Also let the priests who come near to the Lord consecrate themselves, or else the Lord will break out against them. Moses said to the Lord, The people cannot come up to Mount Sinai, for you warned us, saying, Set bounds about the mountain and consecrate it. Then the Lord said to him, Go down and come up again, you and Aaron with you, but do not let the priests and the people break through to come up to the Lord, or he will break forth upon them. So Moses went down to the people and told them.
Thank you, sweetie. Yeah. What is consecrating themselves in the mountain?
I don't know.
Yeah, that seems to be an interesting little phrase there, where it tells the people to, wash their robes, consecrate themselves, do not, lay with your wife for 3 days.
Right.
This whole concept.
It's setting yourself apart.
It is. It's setting yourself apart, and they would know how to do this because they already had consecration instructions.
Right.
Which these are the things we see explained later in Leviticus and in Numbers, how to consecrate yourself.
Yeah.
Right? Again, this is just another wonderful example of how they already knew what to do. God didn't tell them in this moment, and this is the laws for consecration. They already knew them because they already had a priesthood who was explaining them to them through Aaron that was passed down from Levi. So I think that's interesting as a point of note for people to realize. I love the part where they blast the horn, It just reminds me of the resurrection, right? This is part of the gospel of the kingdom of God. This is a great foreshadowing, for the gospel of the kingdom of God, that you would blow the last trumpet, the dead in Christ rise, right? And so this is the moment here where they're blowing the trumpet. They all step up to the mountain of God. Just like in the resurrection, we're lifted up, raised at a Sheol, given incorruptible bodies at the last trumpet, taken into the air to the New Jerusalem. As Matthew 13, we are the wheat that is taken to the barn by the angels. And then Yeshua is coming down with his warrior angels simultaneously to rout out the wicked while we're hidden away in the New Jerusalem. So, and then later the New Jerusalem comes down to the ground, Revelation 21. So there's kind of a time period in there. But the point is, we're seeing a wonderful foreshadow of this in some of these specific, step-by-step instructions that the Father's saying, okay, have them do this, and then next they're going to do this, and then when I blow the horn, they're going to do this.
Right.
He could have just told them, come to the mountain,
Right.
You didn't need all the fanfare. So in our opinion, this is where we see a wonderful foreshadowing of the Father continuing throughout his word to parallel the great events that are going to take place on the day of the Lord. We see a ton of this parallel happen also in Joshua chapter 5 and 6 as they encamp around Jericho and the walls fall and they blow the horns. And I actually have done an entire, I did my resurrection videos. I think it was part 2, Wheat and the Tares. It was like the last 20 or 30 minutes of that video. I show all the parallels of Jericho and the first resurrection. It's pretty awesome. So you guys are welcome to check that out if you like. But what sticks out to you in this one, baby?
Well, basically, I guess this is my opportunity to explain the title of the episode. Because everybody knows Exodus 19 is like when the covenant is given.
Right.
And when we celebrate Shavuot, a lot of people, are looking back to this moment in history. And in the crowd that we kind of, run in on social media, there's a popular wording for the new covenant, and they call the new covenant the renewed covenant. Because, and I don't get me wrong, the sentiment I agree with, because the idea is that under the new covenant, it's all the same terms. The law itself does not change, which I completely agree with. But as you and I know, a covenant is separate from the law itself. So the covenant is an agreement made between people and God, and the law is the terms of that covenant. So we're calling this episode the renewed covenant because we feel, Scripture says, when we enter the new covenant, that is a new covenant, a new agreement with the Father, and it's because the new covenant applies to our immortal selves, our immortal
resurrected
bodies. The law is going to be directly on our hearts.
We won't have to learn it.
We also, all this cleanliness, consecrating before we were presented to Him. That day, we're going to be given immediately clean bodies.
Yes.
There's a change.
Eternally consecrated.
Right. And Jeremiah does say, I'm going to make a new covenant with you.
Not like the one I made with your ancestors, your forefathers in the wilderness with Moses.
Exactly. So the whole idea of pushing this, it's not a new covenant, it's a renewed covenant. I understand that it's to drive home the point that the law itself didn't change. Yeah. But as I was reading Jeremiah sometime last year, it hit me. We are waiting for a new covenant.
Right.
Then, as I'm reading through the Torah all this time, I'm seeing the covenant that's being given throughout the Torah. This old covenant, as we call it, it's the same covenant every time. It's just being renewed with each person. So the covenant first starts with Adam, comes down to Noah. Then we have the big Abrahamic covenant, as people call it. Then we see that covenant is renewed with Isaac. It's renewed with Jacob. And here on Mount Sinai, it's renewed with Abraham's descendants. Mm-hmm. So,
in fact, in Genesis 18, the angels that show up to Abraham, and they're telling him about either Genesis 17 or 18, and they're talking about you're going to have a boy named Isaac, this time next year. And they say, and Yahweh will renew the covenant He made with Abraham with Isaac. Right. So this is this concept that's happening here at Mount Sinai with all the descendants that have now flourished after 400 years. Right. So it's this is why it's not the terms of the new covenant because they haven't been given glorified bodies. They still are on the earth. They're not inside the kingdom, and they have corrupted mortal bodies that they still need to learn the law and go through discipleship, which requires discipline. Whereas the terms of the Jeremiah 31 covenant, the context there within, is with corrupted bodies with the law in the heart, where you do it instinctively, like Enoch chapter 5, verses 6 through 10 talks about, we will be unable to transgress. So we will never be transgressing the law, and therefore we will never have to be kicked out of the Father's house, right? So this is why we get this promise of living forever in the land of promise which is paradise, the Father's house, the New Jerusalem to come. So that is the context of the new covenant introduced by Jeremiah and explained by the writer of Hebrews in chapter 8, verses 11 through 13. What we're looking at here in Mount Sinai is the same covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob being renewed to all those who are wanting to actually step into that covenant. Because, as we've talked about in the previous portions, the last 2 or 3 weeks, while they were in Egypt and as the oppression became more, they were unable over time to follow him fully, and many of them were losing his ways, and therefore it reflected in their attitude, and we're still dealing with that, basically.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's where they haven't even set up judges amongst men he would have to go find who were honest.
Right.
So it's like out of, 1.5 to 2 million people, can you find, elders that are honest?
Yeah.
It shouldn't be that hard, but Jethro makes a point to say, make sure you search out these qualifiers for your judges.
Right.
So I just think that that's a great indication of where they came from as far as, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and all the boys who kept the laws faithfully for the most part. Right. And then over time, their descendants kind of losing track. They're losing focus, basically. And lightning and thunder happening here is making them focus again.
Yeah.
So this is definitely bringing them back into the narrow path.
I could say they're like the original backsliders.
That's right, yeah.
Because that's really what happened. But yeah, that's ultimately, we don't disagree with the concept of, making it clear that the law itself doesn't change from covenant to covenant, but it is scripturally inaccurate to call the new covenant a renewed covenant in order to drive that point home. So Sean and I are the type that, I used to call it the renewed covenant. And then when I started to realize, oh no, this is actually a new covenant, we're the type of people that we're okay with throwing that stuff out. If we find out that the scriptures it's just not in line with the scriptures, it's
well. Let's just play for a minute with the idea of the word new.
Yeah.
Okay. Why would we call it a new covenant as opposed to a covenant that already existed and you're kind of just reaffirming it with people? Okay. If all the terms of the covenant, which are the commandments, are exactly the same, how are we defining the term new?
Right.
There's a new unblemished land that we get into, not one that's been overrun by Canaanites and Amorites and Hivites and Jebusites that you got to clear out, who's been doing all these pagan rituals and killing kids and drinking blood. None of that. All that's burned with fire and leveled, and it's a new firmament heaven that comes down in Revelation 21, a new earth, a new charetz that comes down as the new Jerusalem that's been prepared for us. And we have new created bodies that are incorruptible, according to Yeshua himself in Luke 20, Paul in 1 Corinthians 15. And so, therefore, even though our behavior is the same as what is instructed in the first covenant, once we get to this new setting of the kingdom come, it is a completely new covenant that we go into with the land, as Yeshua, as our high priest, our Elohim, our elder in this concept, as he was firstborn of the first fruits of the resurrection. This is why in Isaiah 62 verses 4 through 5 it says, your Elohim, speaking of Yeshua, will marry you. And this concept is speaking to the New Jerusalem, and your sons and daughters will marry you. And that term marry is an English word translated from covenant, right? So if we were to take the Hebrew, it would simply say, your God, your Elohim, will go into covenant with you, speaking to the land of the New Jerusalem, and your sons and daughters will go into covenant with you. So that's the concept of why we're joined to the land, and then we never have to worry about being expelled from the land, right? So this is what all this is foreshadowing. He's trying to get them to take them to the land, do the behavior of the land, even though it's not the true temple to come, not the true land of the promise. It was within the geographical boundaries, right? And what's an interesting point to note is that all this is actually happening within the geographical boundaries of the coming New Jerusalem, which is, is promised this whole concept to Abraham in Genesis 15 between the Euphrates and the Nile. So they're in Sinai within that zone already. But yet he's still talking about, well, I'm going to take you into the land that you're going to possess. Right. It's a little different than the actual land of eternal promise to Abraham's covenant, where they never leave. Right. And they live there forever with their descendants because they've been resurrected in immortal bodies. So there's some subtle context. A lot of people just glaze right over, right? Because they think, oh, this must be the land of promise, right? They're technically already in it. We just have to know Genesis to understand what we're looking at and what was promised to what was promised to Abraham in Genesis 17:8, which was to live in the land forever with his descendants forever. Well, Abraham's dead at this point that we're reading in Exodus 19. So how is that promise fulfilled? He's saying
and
it's all about the resurrection to come.
Even in this chapter we just read, he's saying you're going to be a holy nation of priests.
That's right.
That did not happen when they moved into that land.
It does happen at the resurrection because you're given an incorruptible body with a heart that will never transgress his law, which means you'll eternally be consecrated and set apart.
Yeah.
So this is why we're seeing all these foreshadowings and parallels here as he's training them in this mindset. Right. This is why I say he's basically teaching them a kingdom mindset. Yeah. But it just anyway. I could go on for another 2 hours. We better keep going. All right. So the next one we're going to read actually Exodus chapter 20, and this one here it starts out just saying, "Then God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an idol or any likeness of what is in heaven above or on the earth beneath or in the water under the earth. You shall not worship them or serve them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on their children on the third and fourth generations of those who hate me, but showing loving kindness to thousands, to those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not leave him unpunished who takes his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God, and in it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, your male or your female servant, or your cattle, or your sojourner who stays with you. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that's in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be prolonged in the land which the Lord your God gives you. You shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male servant, or his female servant, or his ox, or his donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. All the people perceived the thunder and the lightning flashes, and the sound of the trumpet, and the mountain smoking, and when the people saw it, they trembled, and stood at a distance. Then they said to Moses, Speak to us yourself, and we will listen, but let not God speak to us, or we will die. Moses said to the people, Do not be afraid, for God has come in order to test you, in order that you may fear, that the fear of him may remain with you, so that you may not sin. So the people stood at a distance, while Moses approached the thick cloud where God was. Then the Lord said to Moses, Thus you shall say to the sons of Israel, You yourselves have seen that I have spoken to you from heaven. You shall not make other gods besides me, gods of silver or gods of gold. You shall not make for yourselves. You shall make an altar of earth for me. And you shall make sacrifice on your burnt offerings and your peace offerings, your sheep, your oxen, and every place where I cause my name to be remembered. I will come to you and bless you. If you make an altar of stone for me, you shall not build it out of cut stones, for if you wield your tool on it, you will profane it. You shall not go up by steps to my altar, so that your nakedness will not be exposed on it.
So.
The
Big Ten.
The Big Ten, that's right.
I noticed there's something missing from the Big Ten.
Whatever could it be? Is it something that Jesus talked about?
I think it's one that he called one of the 2 greatest commandments.
But I thought these were the Big Ten.
So did I. I thought we only had to follow the Big Ten after he came.
This is wild. who is on first?
So, all right, enough of the sarcasm. Sorry, guys. Love your neighbor as yourself is a Levitical commandment. So when people tell you, we don't, all we have to do is keep those 10 commandments, and the only commandments now are to love God and love your neighbor. Love your neighbor is not one of the 10 commandments, and most people don't realize that. It's actually in Leviticus 19. Mm-hmm. So, and Leviticus 19 is a really great chapter, by the way. If you want to show your Christian friends, the law is full of love.
That's right.
Just give them Leviticus 19 and tell them to have a nice day, because, it's all about not holding a grudge, loving your neighbor, loving your brother, being charitable, all the stuff that we think Jesus, made up on the spot when he was here. No, he was quoting mostly Deuteronomy, 19. But Leviticus as well.
Yeah, Deuteronomy 5 and Leviticus 19. Yeah. That's Jesus said all the law and the prophets hang on these 2 commands, right? Now, of course, when he's tested by other people, like in Luke chapter 10, verses 25 to 28, the scribe asked him, how do I inherit eternal life? And Jesus said, well, what's in the law? Mm-hmm. How do you read it? Well, as we were just talking about the resurrection, which is the eternal life that we inherit, that's where Yeshua was like, well, give me your answer from the law. And the guy said, well, he listed off like 5 of that out of the 10 commandments. And Yeshua said, yes, do these and you will live. Now, did that guy live forever?
Right.
He said he was doing them. And Yeshua said, You answered correctly. Do these and you will live. Well, he's like, I've been doing these. Mm-hmm. So they're talking about the resurrection, guys. They all know that men must die once. Yeah. That's the concept of the punishment. Romans 5:12. Sin and death entered the world through Adam. So they all got it. They all got that part. It wasn't the first death they were trying to avoid. It's the second death. And this is what Yeshua always was trying to explain to them, is this idea. So when he's talking about, the greatest commandments, mm-hmm. right, and one of them being love your neighbor as yourself, he's not limiting. He's not just forgetting the 10 commandments. Right. It was much more than just those specific 10 words that were given. In that particular moment, which is why we have the rest of Exodus. Yeah. Like you go into Exodus 22, which we're not on this particular episode, but we'll read it next week. There's lots of instructions, right? And that's another thing you'll hear as we go into these books of Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. You'll hear me say the word instructions interchangeably for the word law. And the reason I do that is because in our modern culture in America, we've heard for so long that the law of God is somehow a burden and that Jesus somehow did away with the law of God. And they think that it was, they take Galatians 3 way out of context and say that it was a schoolmaster and now we don't need it because we got Christ, and I'm like, wait a minute now. Yeshua wasn't better than the law. He followed the law, right? We're definitely not better than Yeshua. Yeah. We need the law, right? And this is where Yeshua himself in John 14 says, if you love me, keep my commandments. Just like in Luke 10 to the scribe or to the rich young ruler, he told him, do these commandments and you will live, okay? Just like 1 John 2:5, this is the definition of how we love God is to walk in the commandments of God. And that's how we walk in discipleship with Yeshua. So,
right. Well, I think one of the biggest things that is neglected when people are taught about the law is nobody talks about it being a loving thing or how it teaches us how to love. And we know Yeshua made a direct correlation between lawlessness and lack of love when he said that the love of many will grow cold as lawlessness increases. And he's not talking about being lawless just to your, whatever nation state you're currently living in. The only law that matters, really, he's talking about God's law. Yeah. So how can the law not be teaching us literally how to love everyone around us and ourselves and God when Yeshua is making that direct correlation between the two? So a lot of people miss that in their Sunday churches. I mean, maybe they're not reading that verse,
So in order to try to attempt to take away the stigma mm-hmm. that is taught against the law, and people are teaching this out of great misunderstanding because that's what they were taught in seminary. That's why you'll hear me call it instructions for living. And because that is exactly what it is. That's exactly what Yeshua said, do these and you will live. Yeah. So this is what we got in Deuteronomy chapter 6 as well. It says these are your life. Do these, when pertaining to and being instructed out of the law. So it's just that, people use that term, they think legalism when they hear the word law, but it's not. It's life. The psalmist calls it freedom. You know what I'm saying? And it's literally how you unchain yourself from the bondage of sin, that it creates the bad consequences in your life that lawlessness will bring upon your life as you walk in the Father's ways, which are his instructions for living, and suddenly you have health, you have peace of mind, you have joy, right? You have blessing and not cursing. So this is what we adamantly and emphatically encourage here at Kingdom in Context, is that you take great care into reading what God's instructions for living are so that you can apply them to your life, right? And so that's, and of course, step one is actually acknowledging Yeshua as the Son of God who came for you as your high priest and your Messiah. Very important. And as you get to that point of faith and understanding that you put your faith in the Son, who is your Messiah, your Redeemer, and your high priest, he instructs you, this is how you now will behave according to the behavior of your Messiah, which was according to the behavior of Yahweh's instructions for living. So this is, we highly encourage you to take a look at that. And what else in this chapter, sweetie, that may pop out to you?
Just as always, another mention of the fear of the Lord. So it says, Moses said to the people, do not be afraid, for God has come in order to test you, and in order that the fear of him may remain with you, so that you may not sin. So I just love how there's always this direct correlation between fearing the Lord and not sinning and not falling into sin, and how it's a merciful thing and also it's a test. Like you were saying last week, He doesn't tempt us, but he always gives us the opportunity to obey him.
And he calls that a test.
Right.
Yeah.
And what's at the root of that, where it all starts, having the wisdom to obey him, starts with the proper fear of the Lord.
That's right.
So I think, that's another thing that, there's been a lot of hellfire and brimstone preaching over the generations about fearing the Lord, but never actually defining what that means to fear the Lord. Instead it has become fear hell, fear being tortured for eternity, not fear the Lord.
And it becomes this idea of repenting, but not even taking the scriptural definition of the word repent. People don't know it means to go back to the instructions for living, to go back to the commandments. So therefore, the definition of repenting has become very subjective for a lot of pastors, which basically means,
say you're sorry.
Come to church 3 times a week and make sure you look good and you're acting right and you don't say anything that offends anybody, and therefore you're serving God, praise God, be an usher. You know what I'm saying? Like, those are all fine, guys. Those are all wonderful things if you devote your life and your time to that, because those are practical works of ministry, okay? Those are practical helps. But there's a specific definition for repentance, and there's a specific definition for discipleship and for loving God and walking with God, and that is keeping his commandments. Yeah. So this is where, we just want to encourage folks toward that as much as possible.
Yeah.
Also, this idea of, he says right there, the lightning, the thunder, all this stuff, they were afraid. They didn't want to talk. Moses, you talk to him, and we're too much. It's too much for us. We're going to die. Yeah. You go talk to him. And he says, I'm doing all this so that you fear me and don't go sinning, right? Yeah. And this will hopefully keep you from sinning, because you're going to see some power. Yeah. Okay? They just came through the Red Sea parting. Mm-hmm. They just came through literal bread from heaven falling down 6 days a week, right? They just came from all these plagues in Egypt where they had supernatural protection.
Yep.
But he knew they still needed a show of power, right? Because those can be explained away, right? That was just some heavy dew that, that just ran through some strange fields off the coast over there, and picked up a honey scent or a honey flavor to it, and then when it finally fell and and condensed, people, how we see this in modern life. People will try to explain away everything. Okay, so here he is giving them no excuse to explain this away, right? You've got an earthquake shaking the whole mountain. Mm-hmm. You've got, his booming voice coming from a fire cloud that's literally burning the top of the mountain black. As we've shown in a previous episode, they've actually found this mountain, and the top of it is still charred black, as you're seeing here on the screen. So this is like archaeological proof. Like, this is actually a real event that happened, because he wanted these people to actually see, look, I'm the God of all creation, and I'm going to do some power for you so that you actually be obedient to me, because he's trying to change their behavior from what they were into something that's, much more productive for all of them. So, it's very interesting that he kind of knows what they need, basically, is what I'm saying. Yeah. Even though they saw all these wonderful miracles and signs so that they might believe, he knew they still were stiff-necked and hard-hearted and full of fear. Yeah. Right? And I can't remember the verse off the top of my head right now. But we know it's in the New Testament where the epistle writer talks about if you're moving in fear, you're not pleasing God because you're not moving in faith. And to fear, this moment here, they're telling them they're in the wrong kind of fear. It's not a fear of reverence and respect. It's a fear of you just go talk to him. We're gonna die. This is too much for us. He wasn't gonna come. He didn't bring them all that way just to kill them. You know what I mean? Right. That was the whole kind of concept. So he's trying to put the right kind of mindset in them. Through all these things. Altar of stones. Very last part. Just seems like it skips, almost like it just jumps tracks real quick to a different concept. He's suddenly, at the very end of the chapter, he's like, oh, and by the way, this is how I want you to build an altar. Yeah. Which I think is fascinating, because he didn't give any instructions about doing sacrifices. Right. You know what I'm saying? Because they already knew them. Right. He's reminding them. He's reiterating all these things, just like they already knew. Don't kill people. We got Cain and Abel, right? Don't kill people. Just like we got, the story of the Shechemites and all that. Jacob was worried, right? Because of what went down with Dinah, and people were supposed to die because they raped Dinah. So they already had this idea of judgment and the law, as we've explained in so many different chapters, so many different previous portions. But in this moment right here, he's just jumps tracks suddenly to the altar.
Well, it's interesting to me, and in my opinion, probably not an accident, that he gives these major 10, and then he goes right into talking about, how to build an altar and the right or wrong things to do, surrounding the altar. because this is the central form of worship.
That's right.
So,
which required a priest.
Yeah.
In case you messed up on these instructions.
Right.
You've transgressed the instructions, the law, therefore you need a priest to make atonement for you. Now the priests themselves are supposed to be already doing these instructions of the law better than other people. That's how they were set apart. Right? And so, yeah, it would make sense. He just goes right into actual worship.
Yeah, and people might be curious about, some people might think that the cleanliness laws are like arbitrary and, oh, what's this weird God just telling these people to be so clean for? There is clearly some sort of physics here that we can't study yet, that involves the glory of the Father and his presence and coming into contact with any sin or anything unclean. If he's the holiest being in the entire creation, he would also be the cleanest.
That's right.
So the priests had to be set apart because it was no joke to be in that presence if you weren't clean and if you didn't have the right heart. Clearly, as we can see, there's some sort of, allergic reaction, if you want to call it, to being in his presence when you're not properly consecrated, and you can, zap your grease spot. Or, before you can even become a grease spot, they have to shoot an arrow at you from far away because they can't get too close. Yeah,
that's another interesting part right there, right?
Yeah.
Like if someone broke through the barriers and touched the mountain, no one was supposed to touch them and pull them back. Just keep them at a distance and throw an arrow at them or a rock.
Kill them from afar.
Don't even get close to them. Now they're contaminated with this amazing power that they can't somehow spread to other people. So, and this is actually leads into something that we've been kind of looking at and studying for a few months now, huh?
Yeah.
About another separate video that we're going to do. We don't want to give it away yet, but it's
an affliction.
Yeah, we want to talk about it, but we also want to do due diligence and make sure we've studied it out thoroughly because to us it's revolutionary. Like it's mind blowing as far as like the implications for the kingdom and how it's layered throughout the Torah, and it's just. It'll make so much sense of some of the boring chapters.
And explaining it being this particular affliction being such an ongoing problem.
That's right.
So, real interesting. Yeah. But to get off of that and back to this topic that we're talking about of the priests needing to be clean and set apart, this is also something I feel is so important that people don't really understand why it's so incredibly important that we have a perfect high priest who's completely set apart. The problem that Israel always had is their priests not keeping themselves set apart. And it wasn't just, not washing their feet before they walked into the temple, right? They were getting into the point where they were in complete idolatry and rebellion and worshiping other gods. And so the problem that mankind has had, it seems, since the first priest Adam, is the priests not keeping themselves set apart so they can go and make atonement for the people.
That's right.
Because that was their role. So,
Which is why we need the Father to send his only begotten Son. To become our perfect sinless high priest. To make atonement for us in the heavenly sanctuary.
Right. It wasn't about we didn't have the right animal to sacrifice.
Right.
Because we had all different kinds of animals he wanted for all kinds of different sacrifices that we'll do in the kingdom because they're a form of worship.
Right.
Not all sacrifices were just because you committed a sin.
We needed an anointed, set apart, perfect high priest, and that's what was prophesied with Yeshua, and that's what was given to us with Yeshua. And that's where, actually, I'll throw the video up here on the screen. We've actually done a whole video on that, about the priesthood of Yeshua, going over the metaphoric language as well as the literal application of his job role as a high priest in the heavenly sanctuary. And so we think it's a fascinating topic of discussion that is very beneficial for people to understand because it'll help you understand the book of Hebrews much better, and it'll help you understand all the prophecies about Yeshua much, much better. So as I flashed that up there on the screen, it's called Yeshua, Our Eternal High Priest. Please go check out that video after this. Yeah,
it really, really helps with that question that everybody has, whether they're a believer or not, of why did he have to die?
That's right.
So hopefully you'll find that edifying.
Absolutely. Real quick, guys, we're going to go into one of our pairings. This is in Proverbs chapter 15. This is just a short one. It's just one verse in verse 22. And this is built upon what we saw in Exodus 18 as they were choosing some of the elders to do judgments for the people. Okay, so Moses needed people around him. So this is Proverbs 15:22. It says, "Without consultation, plans are frustrated, but with many counselors, they succeed."
Sounds like Jethro knew that.
Yeah, Jethro definitely already had this proverb down, huh?
Yeah.
So that's I know we don't do a lot of proverbs, but I I'm always excited when we can include them, so I was trying to this week.
Something to consider is, Moses would not have taken a spiritual counsel from Jethro if he hadn't, had a moment of conversion and, become a follower of Yahweh.
Yeah. Because last time we heard of Jethro was in Exodus, 2-4, and he had convinced Moses not to circumcise Gershom.
Right.
And it almost caused him to be killed, Moses to be killed. Right? So, because Jethro, that seems to be like part and parcel for people that reject Yahweh, is they always go after the circumcision.
Yeah.
That's like one of the big, because Yahweh called it a sign of the covenant.
Yeah.
Right? He instituted with Abraham, and people just seem to really knee-jerk against that one, like right off the bat. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, what do they call them? Intactivists?
Yes,
like that?
Intactivists. And there are intactivists in the body of Messiah, which is really sad.
Which is like an oxymoron.
Really, they don't realize.
All right, guys, this next thing that we're going to look at is in 1 Corinthians 12. And this is, I'm just going to read real quick, unless you want to read this. We're going to read the whole chapter.
No, go right ahead.
So I'm going to read this one real quick because we'll talk about it afterwards, but we're going to...
You'll see.
You'll see. It's exciting. So here in 1 Corinthians 12, verse 1, "Now concerning spiritual gifts, brethren, I do not want you to be unaware. You know that when you were pagans, you were led astray to the mute idols, however you were led. Therefore, I make known to you that no one speaking by the Spirit of God says Yeshua is accursed, and no one can say Yeshua is Lord except by the Holy Spirit. Now there are varieties of gifts, but the same Spirit. And there are varieties of ministries, and the same Lord. There are varieties of effects, but the same God who works all things in all persons. But to each one is given the manifestation of the Spirit for the common good. For to one is given the word of wisdom through the Spirit, to another the word of knowledge according to the same Spirit, to another faith by the same Spirit, and to another gifts of healing by one Spirit, and to another the effect of miracles, and to another prophecy, and to another the distinguishment of spirits, to another various kinds of tongues, and to even another the interpretation of tongues. But one and the same Spirit works all these things, distributing to each one individually just as he wills. For even as the body is one, and yet has many members, and all the members of the body, though they are many, are one body, so is the same as Christ. For by one Spirit we were all baptized into one body, whether Jews or Greeks, whether slaves or free, and we were all made to drink of one Spirit. For the body is not one member, but many. If the foot says, because I'm not a hand, I'm not a part of the body, it is not for this reason any less the part of the body. And in the ear, if the ear says, because I'm not an eye, I'm not part of the body, it is not for this reason any the less a part of the body. If the whole body were an eye, where would the hearing be? If the whole body were hearing, where would the sense of smell be? But now God has placed the members, each one of them, in the body just as he desired. If they were all one member, where would the body be? But now there are many members in one body. And the eye cannot say to the hand, I have no need of you. Or again, the head cannot say to the feet, I have no need of you. On the contrary, it is much true that the members of the body which seem to be weaker are necessary, and those members of the body which we deem less honorable, on these we bestow abundant honor, and our less presentable members become much more presentable, whereas our more presentable members have no need of it. But God has so composed the body, giving more abundant honor to that member which lacked, so that there may be no division in the body, but that the members may have the same care for one another. And if one member suffers, all the members suffer with it. If one member is honored, all the members rejoice with it. Now you are of Christ's body and individually members of it, and God has appointed in the church first apostles, second prophets, third teachers, then miracles, then gifts of healing, then helps, then administration, and various kinds of tongue. All are not apostles, are they? All are not prophets, are they? All are not teachers, are they? All are not workers of miracles, are they? All do not have gifts of healing, do they? All do not speak with tongues, do they? All do not interpret, do they? But earnestly desire the greater gifts, and I will show you a still more excellent way. All right. So,
why did we pair that?
Yeah, just as a general concept here of understanding the delegation,
right,
of how the Father uses these concepts, right? And he said, first an apostle, then a prophet, right? Then a teacher? Was that, then teachers third, then miracles, then gifts of healing, right? So he's setting up like a hierarchy of within the body that has many members. They all should treat each other with respect because everyone has a different role to play, right? So if one part of the body is being glorified, then everyone should rejoice together. You know what I'm saying? And if you're a teacher and you're looking at an apostle, you shouldn't be like, I'm no good because I'm not an apostle. No, you have a role to play as a teacher. And if you're A prophet, you shouldn't be looking at a teacher and saying, well, he's no good because he's not a prophet. You know what I'm saying? Because no, he has a role to play. You have a role to play. Treat everyone with respect and not division, because we're all part of the same purpose, the same group, which is the body of Christ, right? Which is to go out and, make disciples and teach the commandments of God. So,
and we see this parallel back in Exodus when Moses does send people out, to do this. He delegates some of this work out. So I don't know why I can't find my words.
That's right, which is the same spirit that is given to different members of the body for wisdom. Because these guys, working through the law, through the instructions for living, which is the Spirit of God gave those instructions to mankind. So when you're doing those instructions, you're working with the wisdom of the Spirit, and that's what these elders were chosen for in Exodus 18.
Yeah, I've seen quite a few times Paul gets a bad rap for talking about these different roles of leadership within the early church, and people act like he just made that stuff up out of nowhere. He didn't make it up out of nowhere. We see a very clear structure, a leadership hierarchy right here in Exodus and all through the Torah. So
absolutely. I mean, you want to call Moses an apostle and a prophet all in one if you wanted to, but he picked out other members to go out and judge.
Yeah.
All right. So that's, there's delegated authority under him, and that we see that same kind of concepts.
I mean, at one point we're not. I'm sorry.
Paul. It's okay. It's all right.
We're not there yet, but at one point we even see the Father take the Spirit from Moses and put it into the 70. So we even have
Numbers chapter 11, guys. We're going to get there.
Yeah. So we even have a Pentecost type situation happening there. So it's all very similar, and I just always wanted to defend Paul when I have my chance. Because I think if there's anyone more misunderstood in this entire world than Jesus himself, it's Paul.
Yeah. We always joke about getting t-shirts that say, poor Moses.
Yeah.
We're also getting t-shirts that says, don't roll over, Paul.
Yeah.
Because he's just down there rolling over in his grave.
Yeah.
Just people constantly slandering him and taking him out of context. And, because they're not reading the front of the book, so they don't have a clue what Paul's talking about.
Yeah, it's probably good that the dead know nothing while they're down in Sheol, because, he would just be so...
Yeah.
If he had known what was going to be done with his letters, he probably would have burned them. I mean, he probably would have tried to make sure that people wouldn't have access to twist his words that way. I mean, it's just sad.
Which is why Peter had to give a warning
about
Paul's letters, because he was like, these people that can't understand Paul, they don't know the scriptures.
Yeah.
Which is the part of the book we're reading now.
Right.
The law and the prophets, that's what was called the scriptures. Yeah. So, that's why anytime we see a moment in the law and the scripture, the law and the prophets, that Paul is explaining later, we want to try to parallel them if possible.
Yeah.
So the next parent we're going to look at real quick is Revelation 20, and it's a short one, verses 4 through 6. Do you want to take this one, sweetie?
Sure. Yeah, I guess we should start a new series called Apologetics. Just talk about all the times Paul was upholding the law. All right, 4 through 6?
Yeah.
Okay. Then I saw thrones, and they sat on them, and judgment was given to them. And I saw the souls of those who had been beheaded because of their testimony of Jesus and because of the word of God, and those who had not worshipped the beast or his image, and had not received the mark on their forehead and on their hand. And they came to life and reigned with Christ for 1,000 years. The rest of the dead did not come to life until the 1,000 years were completed. This is the first resurrection. Blessed and holy is the one who has a part in the first resurrection. Over these, the second death has no power, but they will be priests of God and of Christ, and will reign with him for 1,000 years.
Amen.
Yeah.
So what was promised in Exodus 19 was that the children of Israel, by doing these terms of the covenant, part of that promise was, I will make you a royal priesthood, right? A nation of royal priests. We see the fulfillment of that at the resurrection, as we just read, because they're also given authority to sit on thrones and judge.
Exactly.
Just like we see paralleled at Mount Sinai in Exodus 18:19. So this is the concept. This is why we also know that moment is not fulfilled yet.
Right.
Because those guys, that entire generation to whom those words were promised, died in the wilderness.
Yeah.
They didn't become a royal priesthood, and they didn't walk around judging nobody and sitting on thrones in heaven with Yeshua.
Right.
Like, all this is speech that goes toward the kingdom come. That's what all the law, the covenant is for. The first covenant, the completion of it, is to get you to the new covenant. That's the whole point, is that you get to the land of promise in this new land, your new body, so you can have a new covenant, not anyway, so we'll keep going, guys. The next pairing we want to look at is going to be in the Apocalypse of Baruch. This is also called Second Baruch. And real quick, we're going to read from chapter 44 in the first 7 verses. And it says, "And I, Baruch, went from there and came to my people, and I called my firstborn son and my friends and 7 of the elders of the people. And I said to them, Behold, I go into my fathers according to the way of all the earth, but withdraw you not from the way of the law, but guard and admonish the people which remain, unless they withdraw from the commandments of the Mighty One. For you see that he whom we serve is just, and our Creator is no respecter of persons. And you see that what has befallen Zion, and what has happened to Jerusalem, for the judgment of the Mighty One shall be made known, and his ways, which, though past finding out, are right. For if you endure and persevere in his fear, and you do not forget his law, the times shall change over you for good, and you shall see the consolation of Zion."
There's that fear again.
It's everything that we've been talking about, guys, is kind of encapsulated right here, okay? He's talking about respecting the Creator, fearing him properly so that you can keep his law, which he calls the commandments. And he's saying, don't shrink back from them. Don't, admonish them and guard them, which means to do them, persevere in them even, in verse 7. And he's saying, if you do this, you will see the consolation of Zion, which is what we've been talking about, the kingdom come, right? Zion is the new Jerusalem to come down. So I just think that this is, here it is, it's just explain the gospel of the kingdom of God. The prophet and contemporary of Jeremiah, Baruch, is telling us he understood this perspective as well. They all did. This was what Yeshua and all the prophets preached. It's the gospel of the kingdom of God. So next pairing we want to go to real quick is going to be in a fun book. It's an apocryphal book called the Testament of the 12 Patriarchs. This is a book that was in one of the canons in the 1600s. It just was never put into the Anglo-Saxon KJV, canon. It was in an Armenian canon in the 1600s, but it was also found amongst the Dead Sea Scrolls. Yeah. So it definitely has some history to it, on par with all the other books in our canon. And we're going to be reading out of the book of Judah from this particular passage. Because basically the concepts, just in case people don't know, guys, the concept of the Testament of the 12 Patriarchs are the 12 sons of Jacob, and each book is, a different name of one of the sons of Jacob. We're going to be reading out of the book of Judah, right? So within each book, it's basically like their deathbed confession, right? So they're all calling their children, like the sons of Judah are being called to Judah. He's about to die, and he basically just kind of speaks some final words to them. So we're going to be reading from the book of Judah, and we'll start in chapter 23 and go through to 25. He says, "Now I have much grief, my children, because of your lewdness and witchcrafts and idolatries which you shall practice against the kingdom, following them that have familiar spirits, diviners and demons of error. You shall make your daughters singing girls and harlots. You shall mingle in the abominations of the Gentiles, for which things' sake the Lord shall bring upon you famine and pestilence, death and the sword, beleaguering by enemies, and revilings of friends, the slaughter of children, the rape of wives, the plundering of possessions, the burning of the temple of God, and laying waste of the land, the enslavement of yourselves amongst the Gentiles. And they shall make some of you eunuchs for their wives, until the Lord visits you, when with perfect heart you repent and walk in all his commandments, and he bring you up from captivity among the Gentiles." Chapter 24. "And after these things shall a star arise to you from Jacob in peace. And a man shall arise from my seed like the Son of Righteousness, walking with the sons of men in meekness and righteousness. And no sin shall be found in him. And the heavens shall be opened unto him, to pour out the Spirit, even the blessings of the Holy Father. And he shall pour out the Spirit of grace upon you. And you shall be unto him sons in truth. And you shall walk in his commandments, first and last. This branch of God Most High, and this fountain giving life unto all. Then shall the scepter of my kingdom shine forth, and from your root shall arise a stem, and from it shall grow a rod of righteousness to the Gentiles, to judge and to save all that call upon the Lord."
Well, I can definitely see why Judaism might not care to mention this book ever.
I know, right?
Because it definitely makes it clear the Messiah is coming to gather the Gentiles.
That's right. Good spot. Yeah, we're real quick. I'm going to finish reading 25, and then we'll talk about some of these concepts in here. In chapter 25, it says, "And after these things shall Abraham and Isaac and Jacob arise unto life. And I and my brethren shall be the chiefs of the tribes of Israel. Levi first, I second, Joseph third, Benjamin fourth, Simeon fifth, Issachar sixth, and so all in order. And the Lord blessed Levi, and the angel of the presence blessed me, and the powers of glory blessed Simeon. The heavens blessed Reuben, the earth Issachar, the sea Zebulun, the mountains Joseph, the tabernacle Benjamin, the luminaries Dan, Eden, Naphtali, the sun Gad, and the moon Asher. And you shall be the people of the Lord, and have one tongue, and there shall be no spirit of deceit of Beliar, for he shall be cast into the fire forever. And they who have died in grief shall arise in joy, and they who are poor for the Lord's sake shall be made rich, and they who are put to death for the Lord's sake shall awake to life. And the hearts of Jacob shall run in joyfulness, and the eagles of Israel shall fly in gladness, and the people shall glorify the Lord forever.
Love it.
So there you have it, guys. Here's Judah telling his kids, I know you're going to mess up. I know you're going to rebel, but you're going to go into enslavement and captivity. But here will arise the branch, right? We see this from Isaiah 11. We see it in the book of Enoch and different places. We see even in the book of Jubilees, the Messiah is prophesied as being called the branch of God, right? He's the vine, right?
We're the branches.
We're the branches. So he's the original branch, and we're the offshoots of him. And it's basically talking about him coming, right? Because he's perfect and without sin, and the heavens shall be opened unto him. It reminds me of his baptism. The Spirit poured upon him, and the Spirit of grace is put upon him, and everyone that walks after his commandments and after his tutelage as his disciple are called sons of truth, because we're going to be worshiping him in spirit and truth when we get our resurrected bodies, never failing to leave that truth in our new spiritual bodies. And then, of course, later in verse 20 or in chapter 25. He goes on to explain that everyone who has been persecuted for his sake or put to death for his sake, they're going to arise and wake to life and to joy, and their hearts be full and run in joyfulness. Another wonderful promise of the resurrection. So what I want to point out real quick is in the very beginning of chapter 23, the very first statement, he says, I know, my children, that you're going to go and practice lewdness and witchcraft and idolatries, and you're going to do this against the kingdom. So here we have Judah, 400 years before Mount Sinai, talking about the kingdom, talking about the resurrection, talking about Yeshua who makes it all happen, right? They knew these guys were in covenant. They knew the concepts that was promised to them from the covenant. In my opinion, because even in these books here, and the Testament 12 Patriarchs, they all mention how they read the book of Enoch.
Yeah.
And so they knew the story of the gospel, the kingdom of God, because it is what they can look towards in their faith and walk after.
Right.
Because they have the end goal in mind, right? They weren't just walking out in blind faith. The Father gave them instructions so they could go after it, so they could run the race towards the goal, as Paul talks about.
Yeah.
They had a goal in sight, and they knew the resurrection was promised to them to take them into the kingdom. So I think it's beautiful, guys. What sticks out to you, sweetie? Anything else you want to talk about?
I mean, just this whole book is incredible, and I just love how vivid it talks about these things like the resurrection. I love how clear it makes it that the Messiah is coming to gather the Gentiles back, and because we know it's not just all the random nations. We know the northern 10 tribes are scattered into the nations, and a bunch of us could be from multiple tribes, in our DNA over time. So, to me, that's part of his plan is to scatter those 10 tribes into the nations. And then when he's gathering the nations,
that's right.
He is gathering back the people that were scattered, the descendants of the people that were scattered.
Well, not just the 10 tribes. No, many people who follow the channel know. I've done an entire video that there was a remnant from the 10 tribes that did repent. It's called Identity Crisis Averted. I'll flash this up here on the screen. You're welcome to check that out if you haven't seen it yet. And I go into great detail about that. But like you're saying, some of them were sold into captivity and slavery by the Assyrians. But even the ones that repented, the remnant of Israel that came back and assimilated with Judah in AD 70, the Romans invaded them and scattered all of them into the nations. So this is why there's a lot of debate today about the people that call themselves the tribe of Judah living in the political state of Zion of Israel today. It's debated whether they're truly from the tribe of Judah or not. I'm not saying they're not. It's just there's a lot of contention and debate about the genealogies because it's hard to tell because everybody's been scattered. Yeah. So we want to love everyone regardless. We don't want to cast judgment on anybody. So if someone claims they're from the tribe of Benjamin or from the tribe of Levi or Judah, don't question it. I mean, that's between them and their family. Just love them anyway, right? It shouldn't matter anyway because we're all grafted in through Christ anyway, through faith and obedience. And this is not only here, but Isaiah 57 And I mean, that is the fulfillment of the idea of him bringing near those who are far, is the grafting in of everybody where we're all scattered, which is the promise of Deuteronomy 30 verses 4 through 6, is that we're from everywhere we're under the heaven, we've been scattered. He's going to bring us back at the resurrection, which is why Judah finishes this portion talking about the resurrection.
Right. Right, and this is also why we shouldn't be focusing on people's skin color and saying because someone is a certain skin color, they were the true whoever's, the true Hebrews, the true tribe of Gad, the true this, the true that. We don't know that, and we're not supposed to know that, because Father knows humans screw everything up, especially judging each other based on our appearances.
That's right.
And he knows that racism is a huge problem within humanity, and he doesn't want any of us indulging in that, and to scatter us all into the nations and just completely mix up the gene pool totally.
Yeah.
You would think, with everyone, that's kind of common sense, that everybody's got a little drop of something in them. You know, you would think that would stop people from being so racist about who the true such and such are because of their skin color. And man, I'm just,
Didn't we just read about that in 1 Corinthians 12?
Yes.
The same Spirit that gives wisdom to all the different members of one body, which that body is Christ, no matter what those members look like. The ear doesn't look like the eye, but the ear doesn't say to the eye that the eye has no use.
Right.
Right? The ear doesn't say that it's a separate body away from the eye. Similarly, no matter what color you are, if you're a believer, we're all one body and we have the same Spirit. So there's this whole concept of love your neighbor as you love yourself.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we all bleed red, and I'm pretty sure all of us have, our heart is muscle colored. So it's the heart that matters, not the epidermis.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, it seems like an obvious statement to make, but unfortunately, we have to make it because there's a lot of strife and contention today among people that are claiming to be the Christian faith, but they're finding their identity in their skin tone, which is really sad. It's because that's not scripture at all.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to our next parents real quick. I think this next one here is going to be in the book of Ezekiel. We're going to be looking at chapter 36, verses 24 through 33. I love Ezekiel. Ezekiel's a fun prophet. And so this is going to be in chapter 36. You want to read this one?
Yeah, 24 through
24 through 33.
Okay. For I will take you from the nations, gather you from all the lands, and bring you into your own land. Then I will sprinkle clean water on you, and you will be clean. I will cleanse you from all your filthiness and from all your idols. Moreover, I will give you a new heart, and put a new spirit within you, and I will remove the heart of stone from your flesh, and give you a heart of flesh. I will put my spirit within you, and cause you to walk in my statutes, and you will be careful to observe my ordinances. You will live in the land that I gave to your forefathers, so you will be my people, and I will be your God. Moreover, I will save you from all your uncleanness, and I will call for the grain and multiply it, and I will not bring a famine on you. I will multiply the fruit of the tree and the produce of the field, so that you will not receive again the disgrace of famine among the nations. Then you will remember your evil ways and your deeds that were not good, and you will loathe yourselves in your own sight for your iniquities and your abominations. I am not doing this for your sake, declares the Lord God. Let it be known to you. Be ashamed and confounded for your ways, O Israel. Thus says the Lord God, on the day that I cleanse you from all your iniquities, I will cause the cities to be inhabited, and the waste places will be rebuilt.
So in Exodus 19, it tells them to approach the mountain, but consecrate, sanctify, or consecrate and clean yourself.
Yeah.
Right? So on this day, at the resurrection, this is what this context is about in Ezekiel 36. We get that sprinkled with clean water. We get those robes of righteousness. We're raised in these incorruptible bodies.
We're being born of water and spirit here.
We're being born of water and spirit as is promised by Yeshua in John 3, so we can inherit the kingdom of God. And he's going to bring us into the land he's promised us. He's going to get his spirit put within us so that we will always walk in his statutes and be careful to observe his ordinances. And he calls it basically being cleansed of all our iniquities. Mm-hmm. So this is in a foreshadowing in Exodus 19. That's what he's trying to get these guys to do. Because what does he say up here? Verse 24. I think it's actually verse 29. He says, moreover, I will save you from all your uncleanness. So this is what he's actually doing for them in an act of mercy at Mount Sinai by giving them 3 days to get clean.
Yeah.
right? Because they can't approach the mountain unclean. They're not going to be saved. They'll be dead.
Yeah.
So this is the point where this is the same parallel with the tent of meeting later at the tabernacle. If they were to approach the doorway of the tent of meeting, they had to be clean, because that was where the dwelling of the presence of the Lord was, within that inner part of the camp in the tabernacle. So this similar concept we see at the base of Mount Sinai, over the whole mountain, with the Spirit of God dropped, right? Which, by the way, all of this is taking place in Exodus 19 and 20 in the time period of Shavuot, which is amazing.
Yeah.
Right? Now, it's a few days earlier, 19 and 20, but as we go on to Exodus 24 and further, that is in the actual festival time and days of Shavuot, which is why they even have that festival meal in Exodus 24. We're going to be reading about that next week, so make sure to come back next week, because that's very parallel to Acts chapter 2. It's amazing, which is also when the Spirit drops,
yes.
right? But that wasn't the first time the Spirit dropped,
right.
was it, right?
Nothing new.
Because as we just talked about this whole time, we're watching the Spirit drop on Mount Sinai in Exodus 19 and 20. So, another wonderful promise by Ezekiel about the resurrection, and I'm excited because I need a new heart, to be honest. One that he puts within me. And I'm actually continuing to work on another video, my second part to my angels video, where I will go over how we're made by spirit and water, as we're promised by not just Ezekiel, but by also Yeshua. So you guys be looking for that later. The next pairing that we want to run to real quick is in Isaiah. It's chapter 2. And I know I've said this before, guys, but Isaiah is my favorite prophet. Besides Yeshua, obviously.
Yeah.
But Isaiah, the Father trusted this guy with so much information, and he just lays it out so well. So here, let's read about this fulfillment of the kingdom come, right? Because what did we talk about? The foreshadowing, the parallel of everything that Moses is doing with the children of Israel to take them into the land. All this was to give them the behavior so that they could inherit the land, right? Upon the resurrection. We see in the Testament 12 Patriarchs, Judah saying that his sons were going to sin against the kingdom, and that at the resurrection we were going to have this branch, the Messiah, who would bring us all into the kingdom, the promised land later. Same thing we read in Ezekiel. And this whole concept is that we become this royal priesthood. Well, this is the moment where we see some of that actually take effect. We see the concept of that we're in this kingdom now. It's called the mountain of the house of the Lord, also called Zion, also called the New Jerusalem, also called the paradise of God, right? Also called our mother above in Galatians 4:26. So this whole concept here is that we are now resurrected in these passages inside the kingdom as this royal priesthood, and there's going to be this same type of eldership of delineating and doing judgment according to the law for all the survivors of the day of the Lord who are encamped outside of the city of New Jerusalem. So let's read about it real quick. In chapter 2, verse 2, it says, Now it will come about in the last days, the mountain of the house of the Lord will be established as the chief of the mountains, and will be raised above the hills, and all the nations will stream to it. And many peoples will come and say, Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, that he may teach us concerning his ways, that we may walk in his paths. For the law will go forth from Zion, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. And he will judge between the nations, and will render decisions for many peoples. And they will hammer their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not lift up sword against nation, and never again will they learn war. Come, O house of Jacob, and let us walk in the light of the Lord. So beautiful, guys. So beautiful. So how are we going to render decisions for many peoples, for all the, who knows, possibly hundreds of millions of people that survive the day of the Lord and have to stream to the New Jerusalem that's going to set down in the area around the Euphrates and the Nile, in that huge area, 1,500 miles squared? How are they going to all come up and hang out, and just Yeshua by himself is going to walk around and help them with decisions? No, it's the same thing we see with Moses. We're the royal priesthood, that we help them with delineation of these decisions for the law, for all these people that come up. That's why we're considered ministers. That's why a priest is someone who ministers the law. That's why it says in the end of verse 3, the law will go forth from Zion, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. We're going to be ministers of that process to the survivors of the day of the Lord, so they can have hope and walk in righteousness for life and peace, so they can inherit the kingdom upon the second resurrection. It's a beautiful promise, guys. It's amazing. And this is why, as we read in Revelation 20, it says, Blessed and holy are those who take part in the first resurrection, because we're going to get to be this royal priesthood for the millennial reign for all the rest of the earth as it repopulates. So I'm excited because, in my opinion, at the end of the millennial reign, this is my theory, guys. At the end of the millennial reign, because we've had 1,000 years of no war, no disease, no sickness, peace on earth, you're going to have who knows how many billions of people on the earth, right?
Yeah.
You're going to have literally the paradise of God at the center of the earth, which, it's called the navel of the earth in Jubilees chapter 4. Everyone's going to live around it and about it, and there's no death, there's no disease. Like, these people are in Ezekiel 47:12, they're going to actually have the water from the river of life that goes out of the New Jerusalem to replenish all the land, as well as the fruit, the leaves from the trees that go along the river of life, so they can have medicine. So we're going to have an incredible population of people that are going to be healthy, whole, and repopulating throughout 1,000 years. So it's my speculation, sweetie, that at the end of the 1,000 years, when the second resurrection has to take place, that there's going to be an incredible amounts of people that will be resurrected at the second resurrection that will just put to shame the first resurrection as far as numbers, right? So I'm just, forgive me guys, I get really, really excited about it. But I also just really wanted to clarify something that when I'm talking about no disease, and they get the trees from the leaves from the trees that grow along the river of life for healing of the body, so they can live longer lifespans, that there's no war, that there's free food in abundance from the New Jerusalem. But also, when I say there's no death, I'm talking about within the city there's no death. Outside the city are still mortal humans that are going to be living long lifespans.
Yeah, they'll live really
as
long.
Zechariah chapter 8 talks about, and also I think it's Isaiah chapter 9. There's long lifespans that are living. This is why they're going to be living up to 1,000 years again. They eventually die, hence the term and the need for the second resurrection.
Right, because guys, this is a great time to point this out. They're still going to be party to the quote old covenant.
That's right.
They're going to be party to that original covenant because they're still going to be mortals.
That's right.
So that's why there has to be a second resurrection at the end of the millennial reign, because you're going to have 1,000 years of people who do faithfully walk out this covenant of the Father. They're going to live in His commandments,
That's right.
and so they are going to be considered worthy, as Jesus says, to attain to that second resurrection.
That's
so
right.
that would be why there's even a need for a second one after that 1,000-year reign.
That's right. So even though we're a royal, we don't want to get into this too much, but long story short, we're the royal priesthood that has authority over the new Levites that are chosen by Yeshua upon His return, which is explained in Isaiah 66 and Ezekiel 45, Ezekiel 44. So there's this concept that the Levites are the priests for the mortals, we're the glorified resurrected saints who are immortal. And then we have a priesthood that supersedes theirs, but we're also going to be helping in the capacity. Because I imagine if you're choosing Levites from among the survivors of the day of the Lord, they're also going to need to be trained in these concepts.
Yeah.
Right? So it's a good thing you got all these resurrected saints who have the law permanently emblazoned on their heart, and they can't transgress it, so they can easily teach others, right? These mortals that who don't know Him. So this is a beautiful promise, and I'm just, man, it's a wonderful day coming, guys. So we hope to be able to show so clearly the concept of the covenant that leads to eternal life. This was the promise. Please put anything down below as far as any questions or comments you may have, or any verses that stick out to you that you think are applicable to some of these pairings that we added this week. But other than that, sweetie, is there anything else you'd like to mention before we go?
I think one thing I want to request people to comment about, if you have any kind of a story lately of where you maybe found yourself in a situation where you had an opportunity to explain the context of a chapter or a verse to somebody that you couldn't, really explain or articulate very well before, and you felt like it was effective, like, share that story with us. Like, You
mean because they were watching our show?
Yeah.
Okay.
If you've been benefiting from, watching our studies and, figuring out, the context of things, and you're finding that helpful in the conversations that you have with people, let us know about it. I'm interested
Absolutely.
to see, how everyone's doing with it. Because as we say at the end of every episode, our heart here It's not likes or shares or popularity or sub counts. It's anyone who's watching. We want you guys to be able to comprehend the Bible in its entirety by keeping everything in context, and then subsequently go out and help others comprehend the Bible by learning and understanding the context of the whole book. So, we just want you guys to be able to effectively explain these things to others and even yourself. And so if you have a story about being able to do that recently, let us know. It'd be cool to know.
Yeah, it'd be a great testimony. Share it if you have it.
And as I always say, if you made it all the way to the end of the video, thank you. We really appreciate you taking the time. We really appreciate it.
We really do. We appreciate all you. And guys, pray for us.
Yeah.
Because we do this to the best of our ability every week, but we want to do it the best we can. So, if you haven't already, we ask you to pray for us that that the Father would lead us in the right pairings, the right concepts that we're talking about and focusing on for that week, that it may be the most beneficial to those who need it at that time. So, we really appreciate you. Thanks for giving us the opportunity to do this again for you this week. Yeah. And we hope that you join us next week for another awesome Kingdom Portions.
Shabbat Shalom, guys. Have a good week.
Shabbat Shalom, guys.